Hi, my name is Nicholas. I'm a 3D animator and I just finished my first personal animation project. Almost. I attended the Think Tank Training Center in 2024 in Vancouver, Canada, and I made this piece for my mentorship program. I wanted to make this video to document my process for this project, which may be a little presumptuous for a student level film, but I figured it might be useful to see where I fumbled so that you can avoid those mistakes, or at the very least find some entertainment out of them. So without further ado, here's how I made my demo reel. So I wanted to animate Prositi's sketch of a villain who unintentionally always does helpful things because, well, it's hilarious first of all, and it's also not super famous, or at the very least it's not Star Wars and Lord of the Rings levels of mainstream, which I think is the sweet spot. And he's a professional voice actor, and so the voice performance was really well done. But it was a bit long. Generally we're advised for a demo reel to have about 2 to 3 pieces, about 20 to 30 seconds each. But this audio clip was about 40 seconds. But if I could use this 40 seconds to showcase both body mechanics and acting, then it would be worth it, and in fact it would be kind of unique. Now, I did storyboards for my piece, which I don't think is absolutely necessary for everyone to do, especially for a student project. You could definitely just jump into Maya or whatever 3D software you're using and just start blocking your poses in right away. To be fair, I don't think I can call what I did storyboards. I think that would be an insult to storyboard artists. They're more like beat boards. I mean, that is the fight scene. But regardless, they help me conceptualize the whole piece easier. I mean, they don't have to look good. It's not like anyone's gonna see them. Wait a minute. But they let me quickly test out ideas and variations, and so I don't regret spending a week or two on it. So when it comes to reference, I was given 2 different ideologies. On one hand, some people might say that, hey, reference is super important and you should use reference for everything. But my supervisor was like, you only need reference for complex movements that you can't understand. And as a pro, you should have a solid understanding of body mechanics to be able to go from pose to pose without relying on reference all the time. I appreciate both perspectives, and in the end, I still shot my reference, but I wasn't bound by it. In the same way that it can be a bit intimidating to use a brand new journal because it's so new and pristine, and so to break through that fear, you might do a bunch of scribbles and doodles on the first page. My reference are like my scribbles for posing, if that makes sense. The final result is far from the reference that I shot, but that's okay. The reference gave me a starting point and gave me the confidence to block in my key poses, my camera positions, and a rough sense of timing. And for the most part, I will stop using my reference after that. Also, on a side note, unless you're a professionally trained fighter, don't shoot reference for your fight scenes. Most of it will be unusable. Just find that online. Though it was very fun to shoot, so shout out to Caden, Angel, and Jordan for your help. For the actual animation, there's not much I can elaborate on that will be super unique from what everyone else is doing. I did my blocking, my major keys, and my in-betweens all in stepped, and then I hit spline to polish it up, offset my keys, the works. I know this is a very basic fundamental workflow, but you can't deny that it works, and I think it's very important to have a strong foundation. I use some animation layers for things like camera shakes or the robot's vibrations, and I'm going to be open to new workflows in the future, but I'm glad I can always fall back on my basics. The hardest shot for me was probably the fight scene, which is also the first shot that I took to polish. I think I spent almost a whole term, like 3 months, just on that shot. My main issues was conveying a clear line of action for the characters, especially the robots, because they're so big and bulky and often aren't even fully in the frame. Sometimes I would hide the geometry of the arms and legs just to focus on the chest and hips, making sure that was working properly before I reintroduced the limbs again. Conveying a sense of weight was also pretty challenging. I wanted the movements to be fast and intense, but we have to remember that these are hulking iron machines, and so I couldn't just match the timing of a human reference. I used motion trails a lot, and tracking the center of gravity to make sure it was doing nice arcs in my camera view before I did anything else was super helpful in conveying weight. Shot 2 was also an interesting challenge because I needed my character's hands to stay together but not be glued in a fixed pose. I needed the fingers to be able to squish and stay in contact while the wrist remained mobile. My mentor ended up giving me a pretty clever solution. I kept one hand in FK as the driver. I then made a locator at the point where the fingers were touching, namely the middle finger, and constrained it to the driver hand's wrists. Let's call this locator A. I duplicated locator A, that's called the new one, locator B, and parented it under locator A. And finally, I parented the IK control of the other hand to locator B, making that the follower hand. I could now rotate the FK driver hand and move locator B to adjust the other hand as needed. So yeah, maybe try using locators more. They're really helpful. So I suffer from a pretty severe condition. I call it gamer group monkey brain because I lose focus and get demotivated if I don't see any visible signs of progress, which is not great for a job that requires you to be at your desk about 8 hours a day. So here's how I got around that. I like to gamify my progress, so what I did was I set up a Google Sheets to track the progress of each stage of each shot. Each cell is formatted to be red at 0, yellow at 50, and green at 100. So the more stages of work I get done, the more green the sheet becomes. Monkey brain neuron activates, unga bunga, dopamine release. Also, using productivity games can be very helpful. I used a game called Pomo Farm on Steam where you grow crops for focusing. I like to think of it as outsourcing your self-discipline. Do whatever you gotta do to keep yourself on task while having fun. I think that's super important. I did some 2D effects because I like the look of them, and I also wanted to incorporate some of my drawing skills in my reel. I got to animate the big smoke cloud with my supervisor, who is a talented 2D and 3D animator, so that was super duper fun. I did two versions, a more Looney Tunes Warner Brothers inspired one that dissipated quickly, and a more anime Dragon Ball style one that lingered on. I ended up picking the anime one because I'm a weeb. Also, how I did the rocks was kind of funny. I had a mentor come in one day and he was like, "Hey, how did you make that? Do you use some physics-based collision system or something?" And then I was like, cube. I sketched how I wanted the cracks to look like and I put it on an image plane in front of my camera. I took a generic Maya cube, extruded it into shape, and repeat that 100 times probably. Listen, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And sometimes it's hammer time. Weirdly, this is the stage of the project that was the hardest for me. Originally, I wanted to texture everything using Toon Shader. I figured it would emphasize the cartoony feel the characters already had, and it would let me get away with slightly more low poly models in the environment. But I couldn't get it to work no matter what. In hindsight, it was probably the fact that the characters' textures had shadows baked into them already. But regardless, my knowledge in modeling, texturing, and lighting was already so limited. This was my first time look deving a project all by myself, and it was overwhelming and frustrating. I remember before this, when I was still animating, my classmates would come up to me and be like, "Hey, it's coming along quite nicely, but have you done any test renders yet?" That's a problem for future me to handle. I kept it really simple. I used Arnold's standard surface shader for almost everything. I used a 3-point lighting setup for each character, and ultimately, I think I got it as good as I could have. Now, some people have asked me if it's necessary to render your animation, and I would say no, but yes. Now, disclaimer, I don't know if this is 100% true. I'm still not employed yet, so take whatever I say with a fistful of salt. But from my understanding, any animation lead worth their salt should be able to judge your skills from a play blast. But before it gets to the animation lead, it has to get through a hiring manager. And this hiring manager might not be as knowledgeable about animation, but they do know what a rendered animated movie should look like. So if you render your shot, hopefully they see it and go, "Unga bunga monkey brain, neuron activated, lighting looks pretty, send that to the animation lead." So yeah, maybe render your shot. Just don't take as long as I did. Okay, I'm not including this in the LinkedIn cut because it might actually hurt my chances of getting hired. But I figured it's actually pretty useful information for any animators out there, so here it is. I put in my hours. I was in school for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week for a majority of this project. I think I'm a perfectionist a lot of the time, and I tend to hyper-focus on things that actually aren't super important. But more importantly, I was learning and doing a lot of things for the first time. So naturally, I'd be a bit slower. I'm hoping that means I'll be faster in the future. Anyways, I spent about 2 weeks on shooting reference and drawing storyboards, about 8 months on animation, probably 1 month on sound effects alone, and 3 months on lighting and rendering. For a grand total production time of...
crippling depression.
Okay, if you really think about it, I'm just trying to be an animator, right? So like the other stuff is not that important, right? I just spent 8 months on 1 minute of animation. And the average animator does what? Like 5 to 10 seconds of animation per day, or 25 to 50 seconds of animation per week. I mean, what's the point? Persona! Alright, jokes aside, I'm really happy with how the project turned out, and I couldn't have done it without everyone's support. Huge thanks to my animation supervisor Kurt Spurgeon, who is this legendary 2D and 3D animator. I've learned so much under his guidance. He really reinforced my foundations and made me into a more competent animator, especially in acting animation. I'm so grateful for all his help. Thank you to Jacob Sorensen, my mentor. He helped me a lot, especially with the fight scene, and taught me more advanced animation concepts. I truly think the fight scene is the highlight of this whole project, and I couldn't have gotten it as good as it is without him. Thank you to Paul Johnson, my global mentor. He just carries so much insight and wisdom of the industry with him, and carries himself with so much optimism. He actually inspired me to make this video, so I'm very grateful to him. Thank you to Jose Arias, my other global mentor. He was like an older brother who would come in and check on everyone's progress, and he always had the most relatable perspectives. Thanks to everyone in the animation lab for welcoming me and creating such a safe and creative workspace. It was always so fun to come in and see what everyone's been working on, and to see everyone's finished work has been very exciting. Like seriously, hire everyone here. They're like the worst generation, but animators and riggers. Huge thank you to Rodrigo Ortega and Sarah Oquera for giving me really helpful lighting advice and basically saving this render. Thank you ThinkTank and everyone in it just for creating the best place to learn. God, there's so many people to thank. Okay, I'm just gonna speed it up. Huge thanks to my cousin Mei and Jared for taking care of me while I was abroad. I would be dead without you probably. Thank you to my homestay hosts Andrea and Archie for giving me a roof over my head. Thank you to my roommate Dylan, who was just incredible, the best. Thank you to my girlfriend, my parents, and my family for letting me take this selfish opportunity to learn. And lastly, thank you for watching. Hopefully it won't take another year before you see the next one from me.